about the person you become on the other side of writing a book. What sort of book it is. It can be a business book, it can be a memoir, it can be anything. It can be a children's book. The process of writing will change your life. Three, two, one. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Artist and Author Show. I'm your host, Tony Lontis, and each and every week we talk to amazing authors from across the planet who have been brave and courageous enough to tell their stories in book form. Today is no different, and in a little moment, I will introduce you to our amazing guest today. But those of you who are listening on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, and the Everyday Women's Network, please know that attached to this interview, wherever you're watching or listening, will be the links to our amazing guests today and the way that you can connect and contact with them. Buy their book, buy their book by all means. And our guest today has 2 books, so there's 2 books there for you to buy, but we will have the links attached to this interview wherever you're watching or listening. Each and every time we interview, I like to do a welcome to country, and it goes like this. I want to respectfully acknowledge the people of the Yugambeh language region on the Gold Coast, Queensland, Australia, and pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging, and all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders here watching or listening today. Today, the title of the show is called The Adulterer's Wife, How to Thrive Whether You Stay or Not. But before you get to talk to this amazing guest, here's what you need to know about the beautiful CJ Grace. CJ Grace is a former BBC journalist, a public speaker, and she had to deal with discovering her husband's adultery and then getting breast cancer for the second time. She refused to play the victim and kept her beautiful, snarky, Monty-Python-style sense of humour intact through the process. CJ has the BRCA gene, the BRCA gene, and that increases her risk of breast cancer. And although they may appear to be separate subjects, cancer often follows or is followed by infidelity. And I've got in brackets trauma. Cancer often follows trauma. And in this case, it was a massive infidelity. CJ's latest book, My Wild Ride, How to Thrive After Breast Cancer and Infidelity, is a candid comic memoir about an uplifting guide to survival. Her first book, The Adulterer's Wife, How to Thrive Whether You Stay or Not, has been an incredible success. The CEO of Huffington Press, Arianna Huffington, indeed invited her to be part of a Huffington Post as a regular contributor after receiving a copy of her book. As a BBC broadcaster and voiceover artist, CJ later worked with China Radio International in Beijing in China, and she is currently a co-host on the Thriving Women Network. She's now divorced, obviously, and US-based, and her mission is to help people use adversity for positive change. Welcome to the show, CJ.
Thank you so much for having me on today.
I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. I must confess to having a few nerves because you're the professional in the arena and I'm the newbie. I only discovered interviewing later in my life, and I have not had the experience that you've had. So please be gentle with me today. And I thought I'd start the show with one of the quotes that you love, and it's called "Information is Power." And I was cheering when I was typing this into our notes for the show today and going, yes, information is power. Information has the power to change perspectives, upgrade your knowledge, and it has the power to change the world. What does it mean to you, CJ?
Well, when I was writing my second book about breast cancer, and when I was actually going through breast cancer for the second time, that was my mantra, because, I embraced my inner anal BBC journalist, and I read tons of books. I mean, the bibliography for that second book has 70 books it references, and it references also more than 100 articles and studies. I really wanted to know. I wanted to get to the bottom of what cancer was all about. I didn't take the doctor's words as gospel. I always checked things out myself. And, I negotiated with my doctor about the particular chemo cocktail I got. I did alternative as well as conventional therapy. I was, for me, information was really important. And actually, it was also important for moving on in terms of infidelity, because particularly if you're going through divorce, you really need to be well informed. It's very easy to sort of go off, based on your emotions, and make some very bad decisions. And so for me, being informed was so important in pretty much all aspects of my life. I would say more often than not, ignorance is not bliss.
It's not, is it, CJ? There's so many things to expand on in that little segment. And one of the things that I'd like to talk about first and foremost in relation to your own healthcare is to be informed. Yes, doctors are well trained and knowledgeable, but they are not the holders of all the information. And you, as a unique human being, you know yourself and your body better than they do. They might be your doctor, but you know you best. So I'm so delighted to hear that you actually did the research around what was happening or about to happen to your body, and you had an informed idea on the way that you wanted to go. I'm curious, CJ, how did your doctor react to that knowledge?
It depended what I wanted to do. My oncologist was very open to me going for, I suggested carboplatin for my particular cancer. It was a triple negative cancer, the second time I had breast cancer. She had originally suggested adriamycin, which is also known as the red devil, and not good for anybody with a history of heart disease in their family, which I have. And she was open to that change, which was good. But there were certain other things that I didn't actually discuss with some of the doctors, because I knew that they would not accept those particular therapies. For example, one of the things that I did while I was undergoing chemotherapy was IV ozone. And it was very effective in terms of mitigating the side effects of chemotherapy. And I could compare myself to the other people in the clinic having chemo at the same time. And I didn't have the sallow complexion. I didn't have skin problems. I was sick. I actually threw up once during the whole period.
Well done.
And so I felt that it made a big difference. And when I went to see my radiologist afterwards, I was still doing the chemo, just coming to the end of it, and I was going to have radiation therapy. She looked at me and she said, "What are you doing? You're looking far too healthy to be on chemotherapy. I hope you're not doing something to negate the effects of the chemo." Well, obviously it was affecting my system because I lost all my hair, so it had affected. But I didn't explain because I felt that she would not have a very positive view. I mean, it's unusual to have a doctor telling you you aren't looking sick enough.
Agreed. But what a good thing, CJ. Can you tell the audience quickly what the ozone, what that means and how it works?
Well, this is a controversial therapy. It's not accepted mainstream, but it has been effectively used in a number of different countries for all kinds of different diseases. I mean, actually ranging from Ebola, COVID, all kinds of different things. And it's and there are different pieces of equipment, and there are different ways of doing it, and there are different people practicing with So I would have to say you need to do your research to go for somebody.
But it was helpful for you in combination with the best Western medicine. And I say this often, CJ, you know you best. And if certain things work for you, they work for you. And oftentimes, in my own medical journey, it's been the combination of the best Western medicine and knowledge with what we would consider alternative or natural therapies. So if you take, for instance, meditation, although meditation is pretty well known and understood, it can have a powerful effect on people undergoing intense treatment of any description, can't it? Then there's lots of things that fall into that alternative way of treatment that have wonderful impacts for you. Yeah?
Absolutely. I mean, it's just like diet and exercise can have a lot of very beneficial effects, sometimes more so than pharmaceutical drugs. I've seen research that seems to show that, for example, exercise is more effective as an antidepressant than antidepressant medications. So that's quite an important point there to think about. And exercise doesn't have side effects. So it's worth considering.
CJ, if it's okay with you, can you go back to the time and the circumstance around the discovery of your husband's infidelity? Because often those moments in time are seared in your memory, and we can go on and move through and have healing and live healthy, wonderful, happy lives. But those particular moments are often deeply entwined in our memory. Can you share that with the audience, CJ?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, I was living a charmed life. I had my dream job with the BBC. Then I went to work in China, a glamorous job with China Radio International, and a fairy tale falling in love with an American that I met there. And then, fast forward to our 25th wedding anniversary, best one ever, spent in Hawaii. Everything seemed really rosy. And little did I know that just 2 years later, both my marriage and my health would be in tatters, because I found out my husband was carrying on an affair with a woman half his age whom he refused to give up. And then shortly after that, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. So it threw me into a deep, dark pit of devastation that I really had to work hard to get out of.
Yeah. And it is those times when you are almost obliterated from the earth in terms of, oh my God, how do we get to this place? And life is really dark and tough and hard. But in those moments, there's little things that keep you going. Do you remember what they were, CJ?
Well, it was funny. I found myself developing a 6-part plan to get me through it. It wasn't that I sort of thought, yes, I need 6 things to do and I'm going to be fine. It just ended up being like that. The first thing that was really important was to find confidants and mentors with my best interests at heart. And these were people who had to keep things confidential. One friend, for instance, that I had confided in my, cancer and infidelity issues, he was telling all our friends about it. So the confidential part of that was no use. No, you want somebody who keeps things confidential. And you want to be able to vent your deepest, darkest feelings with those people and have them give you good advice and a lot of, TLC. And it needs to be somebody who's more than a friend. They can be friends, but they have to be more than friend, because some friends will not want to hear what you might want to say. Yeah. And if you don't have those kinds of people in your life, maybe a paid counselor can play that role. But it's really important to have those confidants and mentors. So that was the very first thing I did. Yeah. The second I did was to rebuild my circle of friends, old and new, because I realized almost all my friends were friends of my husband's or friends that we
that makes it really difficult.
No good. And I'd let go all of my friends from Europe that I'd had before the marriage and all of this kind of stuff. And some of them had even thought they'd done something to offend me because I hadn't responded to emails. I was so busy with kids, with the business, with my husband. But, I had to rebuild those friends and find new ones, basically find interests that I loved and use those to make new connections and build new community, because you absolutely have to have a community of friends. And then the third thing I did, which was very much tied in with my background, being brought up with Monty Python and loving that kind of humor, was laughter therapy. That's so important. You know, I grew up, you know, I was always watching the news. I was a BBC journalist. Well, I gave that up because the news is always bad news. That wasn't going to make me...
It is very negative, CJ, and it appears to me that it just gets more and more negative, and that's one thing I've had to give up in recent years as well. I used to watch the news religiously. I no longer, I don't know what is happening in the news. And that's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, and if something's important enough, you're going to hear about it anyway.
That's I figure.
Comedy is what I went for. I wanted to be, you know, and be with people who brought me up rather than made me feel down, you know, that kind of thing. And I have to say that humor is not the same thing as positive thinking, because I did get these sort of positive thinking Nazis, I have to say, who came to me and said, oh, if you've got to have a positive attitude, you've got to stay positive, otherwise your cancer is going to come back. Well, you know,
you can't be positive all the time. You can be predominantly positive, but it's impossible, I think, to be super positive all the time. And again, you're right, it's different from mindset. It is different from the way you are. So you can be peaceful in your circumstances, and that keeps you going forward one step at a time. Yeah,
and I found laughter was actually a more effective strategy, because, you know, just like Norman Cousins got rid of his excruciating pain from ankylosing spondylitis by humor, he just watched funny stuff on TV and that got rid of his pain, you know, and it was very effective. And I found that humor was much better for lifting my mood than trying to force a positive attitude. That just didn't
work. In that 6-stage plan that got you through that moment in that period of your life that was so hard, I was thinking about you and your book, and a funny skit came to mind. So I'm a very visual person, and it was a sliver of any of those number of movies that show a scorned woman reacting to a husband or partner's infidelity. And the one that came to mind was the image of a woman going through his wardrobe and cutting all his clothes into pieces. Did you have any feelings like that, or it was just one step in front of the other?
Well, you know, betrayal does often bring up thoughts about taking revenge. But the mantra of my first book, Adulterer's Wife, Whether You Stay or Not, is that the best revenge is to get past the need for it. I saw so much vitriol when I was looking at infidelity sites on. And, you know, what's the next step? You've just destroyed all your husband's clothes. Now you have to negotiate the divorce. Or now you have to negotiate child custody. And you've just destroyed his whole wardrobe. Do you think you're going to get a good response from your spouse, even if he's the guilty party who's been unfaithful? I don't think so. And it just doesn't serve your long-term interests. And that was one of the things that I had to bear in mind, whatever I did. However,
there were kids involved.
You know, you have to look at what serves your long-term interests. And I was fortunate that when this happened, or at least when I found out about the final infidelity, because he had been unfaithful throughout the marriage.
CJ.
But, you know, when I found out about it, my kids were already grown and out of the house, which meant
that is a blessing.
Were not part of the decision in what I would be doing next. But they are part of the decision in that, you know, you do want to have it so that they can still have a relationship with their father. You do want to have it so that, you know, you can still have a relationship with them, because you're not having to make them choose between this evil adulterer and you. No, that doesn't work. It really doesn't work. And
it's easier said than done, CJ. That whole, you know, attending the kids' 21st or 30th or weddings or whatever it is, and having to be in the same space as that person, that can be challenging, can't it?
It is challenging, but one thing that I wanted to bear in mind is that, 1 minute this person you've married is a saint, perfect, beautiful, lovable, the main person in your life. And then when you found out that they've been unfaithful, they become an evil demon. But it's the same person.
It is the same person.
The same flawed individual. And, with good things that drew you to them in the first place and bad things that may make you now want to leave. And I wanted to always remember that this was not a demon. He was, he was just a flawed human being. And we had good times together. Yes. And I didn't regret the marriage, even though I was pretty unhappy with the infidelity. I didn't regret the marriage. So that was the way I saw it, and I just wanted to get out of that vitriol. There's too much vitriol.
There's a lot, or there can be a lot, and managing that in terms of your own self and your own health, it is a big thing, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I got a lot of very hypocritical advice. One close relative who was having an affair herself. She felt she was justified in that, for whatever reasons, she felt she was justified in doing that. But she came down really heavily on my husband when I told her about the infidelity. Oh, you have to get divorced right now. And he's awful. I never liked him. And she was going on and on and on about that. And I was thinking, no, I don't want to hear that. And there's just a lot of hypocrisy around it. And there are a lot of reasons why people are unfaithful. Some of them, you can understand. Some of them are, less than positive. But it doesn't mean that you suddenly turn somebody who's just a flawed guy into a devil. Yeah, because they're not.
Yeah, absolutely. CJ, one of the other concepts that you talk about is the emotional impact of infidelity and cancer, and the links between infidelity and cancer. Can you talk to the audience about that and what it looks like from all the research you did?
Yeah, I mean, there was a study by Michael Glantz of the Barrow Institute in Phoenix. I think he did the first one in 2001 and then a follow-up in 2009. And he was studying the gender disparity of partner abandonment when that partner is seriously ill. And he found that in some circumstances, a man is 12 times more likely to leave a sick woman than the other way around. And it was a huge, huge difference. I mean, and I understand it somewhat. Women have more of the care genes, and we're more used to ministering to our partners, and men have a hard time dealing with that. And, probably one of the saddest cases of partner abandonment when the woman got breast cancer. I couldn't believe this story, except I know the person it had happened to.
Yes.
So she got breast cancer, and they had a disabled child that they were taking care of. And the husband was so overwhelmed when she got the breast cancer, he actually, in his own mind, made up this story that she had been unfaithful, which was completely untrue, and used it as a pretext to leave her. Unbelievable. But men have a very difficult time coping with sick women, and it does happen both ways. Infidelity, I've talked about breast cancer or cancer causing infidelity or causing the breakup of a marriage, but it does also happen when you have the cancer first. It can lead the husband to be unfaithful for various reasons. So often the marriage becomes celibate because of all the treatment that the woman's doing. The man is kind of overwhelmed, and he finds solace elsewhere. I the John Edwards story everybody knows about in America. I don't know whether it's as known in Australia. He was a politician who had an affair while his wife had breast cancer, and actually fathered a love child from that relationship. And it ruined his political career, actually. But it is one of those things that men have a difficult time coping with sick women, but also the other side of it, infidelity, that when you have breast cancer, you can get infidelity. And when you come across infidelity, trauma, any of that, it can create cancer, because
absolutely,
one of the major causes of cancer is stress.
Yes, definitely.
Infidelity is a huge cause of stress. You've got the emotional stress. Lost the relationship as you knew it. It's like
there's a grief. Yes,
it's a bereavement, because you've lost the relationship that you knew has died, and you create a new one, or it's gone. You can either rework the relationship, or it is gone. So you've got the emotional stress, you've got the financial stress, because if you're thinking about getting divorced, well, if you split all your assets up, half of what you had, if you get that, if you get half, is a lot less than 100%. So you've got the financial stress on top of that. And then you have the stress of potentially having to move out of your home, because somebody's been unfaithful. Do you want to just leave because you don't want to be with them anymore? Are you going to have to leave because you have to sell the house as part of a divorce settlement? All kinds of things like that. So it is a huge cause of stress. And then that stress can lead to cancer. And I came across in my research a number of stories of women who, maybe a year, 18 months after having found out about their husband's infidelity, ended up getting breast cancer.
Yeah, there are so many links between not just infidelity, but lots of different forms of trauma and cancer. It's because you're under so much stress, and stress causes cancer. It does. CJ, the title of your book is whether you are thriving, whether you stay or not. So I'm curious to know, was there a point that you were deciding to stay, or was it you were always going to go? How did that work for you? What were your thoughts?
Well, it was interesting, because when I found out about my husband's infidelity, he offered me a part-time wife position. And he actually said to me, I'd be perfectly happy spending 2 or 3 days a week with her and the rest of the week with you. And,
wow.
I actually considered that proposal for several months, because I didn't want my whole world to collapse. I didn't want the marriage to end, so I actually considered that. And then when I was sitting in a clinic having chemotherapy, and he was in Europe with his girlfriend, it was pretty obvious that a part-time husband was not going to work for me. So that was really when I decided I need to be separate. And I was separated for a good long while, until we actually decided to get divorced. We were actually separated.
And
but
I
have to tell you, Tony, though, if he was willing to give up the girlfriend, I would still be with him. But in retrospect, that would have been a mistake, because I am now so grateful that it happened, because I am so much happier now than I was then. I didn't realize when I was in that relationship exactly how unhappy I was. I had to get out of it to see that.
Yeah. Isn't that often the way though, CJ? It's not until you're through, past, or out of a situation that you look back and go, that wasn't actually as great as I thought it was. It wasn't what I thought it was. You're so close to that situation. You're so entwined. There's kids and houses and jobs and all of those things that knit you together. It's not until you step out and start doing the healing and the dealing and all the rest of it that you go, possibly wasn't the best place to be. CJ, can I ask about your relationship with him and with the kids now?
Well, I have a great relationship with my kids, and they both have a good relationship with their dad.
Amazing.
I didn't, I don't know whether they're particularly keen on the idea of infidelity. That's a different story. But they have a good relationship with him, and they have a relationship with me, a good relationship with me. So
that's awesome.
I did not want to have them be, pitted against us, have to choose one over the other. That wasn't going to be a good idea. And I have I have a great relationship with my ex now. I mean, it's okay. If I need to, I can call up and talk to him about something. And if he needs something, he can call up and ask me about it.
Yeah.
So it's not like we've got, to go through lawyers to just ask every single tiny little question, as some couples end up going that route. But obviously I mean, it could be better. It's not, it's okay. I think that when you have a divorce settlement, that's also a source of that can be a source of bitterness sometimes. And I think that that was a hard thing for him to swallow. I mean, accepted that here in America, it's a 50-50 split, but I think that's still difficult sometimes to accept. But that's just the way of the world. I mean, I have to say,
it should be 50-50.
Yeah, I was very, one of my friends from Guatemala said to me, you're very lucky here in this country. In my country, if a man gets fed up with his wife and he doesn't want to have the children in the house anymore, he can boot them all out, get a new woman in there, and his wife has no recourse. So, I mean, we are very fortunate in the West.
Oh gosh, that's really rough, isn't it? I didn't know that. CJ, in some of our previous conversations, and this is just dropping into my mind now, we had a conversation about the link to breast cancer and bras, and your idea that not wearing bras is a great thing for women to do. Tell us about that research, because nobody talks about it very often. And as you know, I am very much for the not wearing bras thing. It's a better way to go through the day, not having to wear a bra, simply because that's what we're told we have to do, when in fact it's probably and most possibly could be very detrimental to us, can't it?
That's true. And there was a groundbreaking book by Sidney Ross Singer and his wife, Soma Grismeyer, called Dress to Kill, the link between breast cancer and bras. Dress to Kill.
Yes.
They, after having seen that there was a Harvard study, I think done in 91.
Yes, it was a Harvard study. Mm-hmm.
They developed the research. They did a lot of research on it, and found a huge influence of bra wearing on the incidence of breast cancer. And they found the link between bras and cancer was stronger than that between smoking and lung cancer. Wow. And they also found that in societies where the women were not wearing bras, those societies, the rate of breast cancer between men and women was almost the same. And that is unbelievable, because how many men with breast cancer? I think I only know one person, and that's because he's got a podcast about it. Yeah. But I know, dozens and dozens of women who've had breast cancer.
Yes.
And let me tell you,
every woman knows another woman who's had or dealt or dealing with breast cancer.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, 1 in 8 of every woman in the US and in the UK, those are the areas I know well, will be diagnosed with breast cancer in her lifetime. And what the singers say, what Sidney Ross Singer says in his book, is that it's because the reason why bras are so bad is that toxins, waste products tend to collect in fatty tissue. Where do we women have fatty tissue? In our
boobies.
And what normally happens is that the lymphatic system will flush those toxins and waste products out. And it's a fairly passive system. So if you constrict that, the lymph does not flow and the toxins and waste products stay in the breasts, creating breast pain, cysts, and potentially
all sorts of things.
And so, you know what Sidney Ross Singer says. He was a guest on one of our Thriving Women Network shows the other week back. This was on the Uncomfortable Conversation show. But you know, he has a challenge for women. He says, try to not wear a bra for 30 days and see how you feel. If you're getting breast pain, try to avoid wearing a bra for 30 days and see if you notice an improvement, because he found that the longer you wear the bra and the tighter it is, the more you're likely to have problems. And then when you have underwire, it's a whole different problem, because that constricts.
Because it absolutely constricts and impacts and puts pressure on those points across your chest.
But also it does seem to act as a receiver for dirty electricity. And so you are getting dirty electricity in your breasts from the wire in your bra. There's a very bizarre story. I can tell you a really bizarre story that made that very obvious to me.
Tell us.
My son, when he was, you know, maybe 8 or 9, he had to wear this headgear. The dentist had just prescribed this orthodontic headgear. He wears it for the first time at night, and the next morning he tells me he was terrified. He could hardly sleep. He had terrible nightmares, and he was convinced there was a monster in his closet. And I just thought, what's going on? And I had this EMF meter, and I'd seen on these shows that sometimes you can see that there's ectoplasm in the middle of the room, and it creates this sphere of EMF activity. And I thought, oh, maybe there's something going on in his closet that we don't know about. So I took this thing in his room, nothing in his closet, but there was a straight line of strong signal right by his bed from the ceiling. And it only came on when his brother had his computer on in the next room. So there was obviously some dirty electricity in an electrical line in the ceiling that he had picked up on this wire around his head. And the disturbance that his brain received was interpreted while he was trying to sleep
as dreams,
as a monster and nightmares. And when his brother turned off that computer and let him sleep,
that solved it.
Didn't get the nightmares. He didn't have any feeling that there was a monster.
Wow, CJ, incredible.
So bizarre story, but it shows
CJ, there's so many things that we don't know, isn't there, about our universe and our world. You know, things that we might think are far-fetched are now being shown to be so true. And imagine what we're going to discover in the next 100 years, particularly around cancer, propensity to get cancer, the information about the BRCA gene, like that's only happened in our lifetime even. To understand that this gives you a predisposition to breast cancer. The BRCA gene, can you tell me, is it passed to daughters and sons, or is it not always passed, or how does the gene work from your research?
Well, it doesn't always go to your children, because they're going to get their genes from your partner. And of course, you know, most of my family died in the Holocaust. You know, I have to say the Nazis obliged before they had a chance to develop cancer. So I have no clue which side of the family that is one of those genes that's very common in the Ashkenazi community. And that is my family background. So but I have sons, so they have chosen not to get tested as yet, but they might have a higher propensity to certain cancers. But the risk with the BRCA gene isn't only breast cancer.
No, it's others as well, isn't it?
Yeah. And one of the things that I would say is that, you know, there is this propensity to recommend bilateral mastectomies. And I turned that down. It was a controversial decision. Some people
it's a huge operation. It's so mean.
big problem with that is reconstruction. Reconstruction is actually a more serious operation than the actual mastectomy.
Mm-hmm.
And there are so many problems that people have had with breast implant illness.
Oh,
it is very real. And you know, Nicole Deruda's Facebook support group has over 175,000 members. It's a Facebook support group for breast implant illness. And so, and it's interesting because a lot of people, you know, especially some of the doctors are poo-pooing that link. There was even a study that was done that by some surgeons in Holland, and they were trying to make out that it was all because the women are neurotic. This was an official study that came out last year that women who complain.
Oh my goodness.
Likely to be neurotic, really. So you know, and it's the same.
Wow.
I saw story actually with the bras and breast cancer thing, because there are numerous studies out there showing the link between bras and breast cancer,
but nobody talks about it.
Mainstream community trumpet one that was done in 2014 that shows no link between bras and cancer, but that's because it had no control group of women that don't wear bras, which would be like studying the link between smoking and lung cancer without including smokers in the study. And also it only looked at postmenopausal women in whom the effects were much weaker. Why? Because there is survivor bias. Those are the women who, with or without bras, had survived to that time, rather than looking at younger women who might have succumbed to breast cancer from bras. They aren't even included in a study if you only look at postmenopausal women. So there were a number of flaws in that 2014 study, but if you Google it, Google the issue, that's all that comes up. None of the other studies come up. They come up as discredited, and you know,
but they're not discredited.
They're not. So that's where I do the information is power thing. You really have to research, and these days it's very difficult to find accurate information about alternative health by Googling. You have to really know what you're doing and go to a number of different sources to find the full story.
That's the thing that sort of in thinking about research, that it came up heavily throughout COVID when people were citing research about this, that, and the other, and all sorts of different things. But in citing research, you have to look at the research and you have to look at what they're examining. If they had a control group, what the control group looked like is an accurate reflection of what that can, like, there's a lot of things. It's not actually good enough to quote research without looking deeply into the research itself and having a mind that is open to being, oh, actually, they didn't look at this, or they didn't discuss this. So that means that their results are skewed in this way, or their results are skewed in that way. And it's, yes, Google is where everyone goes. And if it doesn't show up in Google, does that mean it doesn't exist? Well, no, actually, it just means that Google doesn't show up in a Google search. That's all. Yeah.
And the problem with a lot of the research is you have to follow the money. You know, a lot of research is done by industry, and they're designed to
why
show
should we believe it then? You know, that's always
so that whatever the industry is paying to have done is you know, whatever drug or
it's
whatever
biased. It's biased by the nature of it.
Yeah, and there's a wonderful book that I do quote it in my My Wild Ride: How to Thrive After Breast Cancer and Infidelity by Malcolm Kendrick, called Doctoring Data, and he deconstructs exactly how so many of these studies are biased. It's a very very good book. He also is British and has a wonderful sarcastic sense of humor, which I appreciate. But you know, you really do have to look for unbiased studies that are not funded by interest groups.
Yes.
And sometimes when you even look at the cancer charities, they are funded by the cancer industry, and so you get very different views from them. Like the American Cancer Society insists that there's no link between bras and breast cancer. So but there is, you know, there's plenty of evidence to show that there is a link between bras and breast cancer, and also there's plenty of evidence to show that, you know, breast implant illness is very real. Even the FDA, which is not the fastest of organizations to tell you that something dangerous, even the FDA is saying that there should be warnings and
there should be.
That there are warnings on breast implants, the silicone breast implants. They are now saying that.
Definitely.
So the trouble with that is a lot of people have these systemic problems and they don't realize why they're getting them. And sometimes it can be from breast implants. If the silicone is leaking, it can cause anything ranging from, migraine to, fibromyalgia, through, chronic fatigue, all kinds of weird things, or weird pain behind the arm, and one of the...
And sometimes, CJ, they don't even have to be leaking to cause issues.
That's right. Yeah. And one of the poster children is for campaigning against breast implants is Crystal Hefner, who's Hugh Hefner's widow. She had them for cosmetic reasons and once she had them removed, she started to feel better, but she was feeling pretty unwell for a goodly long time until she got rid of it.
Yeah. CJ, what a fascinating discussion with you today. We are getting towards the end of time and I have still a couple of questions that I really want to ask. Firstly, can you tell the audience where they can get their books and how they can connect with you? Because you also do loads and loads of amazing speaking events. So if you're listening to this interview today, just a reminder that CJ is an amazing speaker. And so how do they connect with you?
Well, as far as getting my books, they're available on Amazon in print and in digital format. My next project will be to put them in Audible. That's the next thing I need to do. But I also have a website, cjauthor.com, cjauthor.com.
And they're there.
And so on that,
and samples.
I've got tons of blogs. I've also got two free PDFs you can download. One is on breast cancer and the other one is on overcoming infidelity, but they actually work for overcoming adversity of any kind.
Yes, they do.
That I mentioned, and I talk about the 6-part plan in detail because we didn't cover all of that today.
I know, so much to talk about.
So and I have blogs on all kinds of different subjects, and I cover the bras and breast cancer issue, and also some of the dangers of breast binding. Because bras are bad. Breast binding is bras on steroids. So it's a shame that young people are doing that, at least in terms of health, because I think that may lead to
a bigger health
problem
down the line. Yeah, I agree with you, CJ. And my last question, one of the favorite ones that I like to ask, is twofold. So any final words, and then what's the vision for the next 5 years?
Well, my final words are there is always hope. And, I did what I thought was right. I'm not a doctor, so, I can't tell anybody else how they should deal with their cancer. But the great thing is, to quote Monty Python, I'm not dead yet. And that's the best. Getting up every day in the morning is the best thing in the world. And
absolutely.
And my vision for the next 5 years, I'd like to get the message out there to help women reduce their suffering, whether they're going through breast cancer, whether they're going through infidelity, because adversity really is a catalyst to make your life better than it was before. It is possible to do that. And the final thing that I would like to see in the next 5 years, it's not necessarily something that I can do, but I would like to see much more integration of Western medicine with alternative therapy.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Both. I don't like this polarization that you have to go.
I agree.
For both, and I'd like to see that in the future a lot of the more damaging treatments that are out there for breast cancer from the conventional community will be out of date. There will be new treatments involving some alternative processes as well that will create good, vibrant health, and not breast cancer.
Absolutely, because ladies, we need every single one of you living amazingly inspired and abundant lives. Yeah?
Absolutely.
CJ Grace, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's been a divine pleasure to chat with you today and talk about a whole range of things. I look forward to further conversations in the future. And just a reminder, audience, please jump on to CJ's website, cjauthor.com. Have a look for her books. They're really wonderful, and there's beautiful illustrations that make me laugh. I was on there again last night, and I'm like, oh, this is such a great book just for the illustrations. So I'm going to leave it there because I don't want to spoil it for you, and I want you to go and get the book. CJ, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
It's my absolute pleasure. And that, my friends, is your lot for today. We will be back again with another guest. It's not about the book. It's about the person you become on the other side of writing a book. What sort of book it is. It can be a business book. It can be a memoir. It can be anything. It can be a children's book. The process of writing will change your life.